Hey, I'm Max, and today I'm starting a new series for the basics of Unity. So this is really a series if you have never used Unity before. I'm going to teach you how to use everything in Unity that you need to make your game, and I'm going to try to explain everything as clearly as I can to make sure you understand how it works and you can apply it in your own game. There is not really any order in which you need to watch the video to understand everything, but it's recommended to watch it in the order of the playlist. I'm going to make a playlist and put in all the videos explaining the very basics, and you can watch them in that order if you want to. So for this first one, what we're going to look at is the Unity editor. Right now I'm using Unity 2020.3 because it's the latest LTS version, but even if you're using an older version or a newer version, it should be pretty similar. So let's get started. First, you have all the things at the top like most software have, where you can create a new scene, save, open a project, build, and all that stuff. Most of these are not very useful. A few of these that are useful is go into File, Build Settings, and here you can change your platform and other build setting. If you click on Player Setting here, you can change the name, the product name, the version, and even set an icon for when it's on your desktop or on your mobile phone. And you can also add the scenes that are going to be in your build, so that's very important before you build to add all your scenes. Also here in Edit, you have Project Settings, which is the same thing that you get when you hit on the build. And you have your preferences, which are different Unity editor settings, such as the colors of everything, the external tools like setting up your Visual Studio, and different settings that you probably will not use. You also have in Edit all your shortcuts. Here you have the options for the game objects, but you actually won't go here very often because you can just right click here and get the same things. Same thing for components here, you can just right click and get most of them. If you go into Window, you can open the Asset Store to download some assets or even buy some assets. And you can also open the Package Manager to import some packages into your project, such as the input system or the universal render pipeline to make some lighting in your game and all that stuff. You can also open different windows, such as the animator or animation that I have down here. So let's say I close this one here, close tab. If I go into Window, Animation, I have it pop up here and I can dock it anywhere. So here to the side here, I can put it down here, which is usually where I put it, and you can set up the layout the way you want. So for example, I put my animator here because I don't need to see it at the same time as the game often, but if I do need to see my animator in the game at the same time, I'll usually drag my animator here, and this way I can see both. And here in 2D you have tile palettes if you want to make some tile maps. By default here you will have the scene view, which is the view where you see all your scene elements, and the game view, which is the view from the camera. So as you can see, my camera here only sees this. I can zoom out and everything, but here in the game view I cannot zoom out, it's just the camera view, I cannot move or anything. At the bottom left you get all your folders and in your assets. The assets that you see here are actually assets in your folders. So if I go here in my Unity projects tutorial where you create your projects and you go into assets, you'll see that what I have here is the same thing as here. So if I were to drag some sprites here, I would see them appear over here in my project. In here you can create folders, scripts, any sort of prefab, material, all that stuff. In here you can also switch between scenes if you have multiple scenes by double clicking them. And you can access your console over here next to the project. As with most things you can move them around, but I prefer to set it here. Over here in the editor, also in the scene view, you can click on gizmos to disable them, which shows you, for example, where the player input is, where the camera is, and all that stuff. Or you can just disable specific ones if you want. You can also switch from 2D view to 3D view by clicking the little 2D next to shaded, in case you want to make some games where there's some 2D aspects and some 3D aspects. Or sometimes there might be some bugs and going to 3D can help you solve them. Like one time I had a grass on my map and I didn't see it when I went to game view. So I went into 3D here and I saw that my grass was actually too far into the Z, it was way over there. So I set it to Z0 and it spawned back here. You can also change some things like setting it to wireframe or something, but that's not very useful, I never used it. To the left you have your scene currently open with all its game objects. I will talk about game objects in the next video. Just know that you have to go here under your scene and you can right click and create an empty game object or any sort of game object that appears in here. And to the right you have the inspector, so if you click a game object it's going to show you the name, allow you to set it to static, change its layer and its tag, also see the transform with the position, rotation and scale, and any components attached to it. So to change something, like let's say I want to change the text here, I can click and select another text, like right now I just have one, so I just have this. Or you can also go into your scene and drag the text into the field. If you go into the inspector, you can click the little square next to a component to remove the component or copy it. Finally, one of the most important things in the Unity editor is the toolbar. So first you have the End tool that lets you move around without selecting anything. Then you have the Move tool, which you need to select something, let's say my main camera, and then you get a little square that you can drag to move anywhere, or arrows so that you can drag to move only in one direction. Then you have the Rotate tool, which lets you rotate in all directions, so on this side, and on this side. As with most programs, you can Control Z to undo, and Control Y to redo. You have the Scale tool, which lets you, as the name suggests, scale things. And the last tool that I use is the Rect tool, which lets you change the size of objects. And for example, this camera here, I can change the size, but I cannot move it. But let's say I drag an enemy into the scene. With the Rect tool, I can change the size, and I can also move it. So it's kind of a combination of the Move and the Scale tool. This also works on UI elements. So let's see here the text, I can drag it to make it bigger, but it doesn't actually make the text bigger because I need to increase the font size. But let's say the font size is 150. If the square is like this, it works, but if I make the square too small, it doesn't work anymore. And let's say I use the center function. If I change the size of the rectangle, it moves the text. Thanks for watching. Hopefully the editor of Unity is pretty clear to you now. With some practice, you can learn everything that you need to very quickly. Don't hesitate to leave a comment if you have a question, and make sure to check my next videos if you want to know how to use game objects, scripts, animation, and all that stuff.